I am Ellie, and by all accounts, I was born into a life of privilege, though I didn't recognize it initially. Growing up in an affluent family, you tend to assume everyone's reality mirrors your own. My family ran the most successful chain of pharmacies in the state, called Ellie Pharmaceuticals, a venture that wasn't just a business, but a treasured legacy crafted by my grandfather and later inherited by my father, William. My childhood home was a Grand Victorian, where my father would return from work each day, his designer ties slightly loosened, and launch into discussions about profit margins before he even greeted us. At dinner, he'd proudly share news of yet another record-breaking quarter, while my mother would listen intently, her pearls glinting in the soft light, showing her approval. "This is what I'll hand down to you someday," he'd say. My older brother Mason, however, would simply play with his food, seemingly uninterested. At 14, while I was still preoccupied with dolls, Mason was already fascinated with ancient civilizations rather than fiscal reports. He'd attempt to steer the conversation toward his latest archaeological find from our backyard, only to be dismissed by our father. I, on the other hand, was the quintessential daddy's girl, drawn to the family business from a young age. By the age of 16, I knew every regular customer by name and could list our stock as effortlessly as reciting the alphabet. My father beamed with pride when I discussed assisting elderly customers or when I proposed new product displays that boosted sales. "Business runs in her veins," he'd proudly claim. As Mason delved deeper into history books and archaeological journals, my father began involving me in the business side of things. By 18, I was familiar with inventory checks and basic accounting. "Watch and learn, Ellie," he would say as he taught me contract negotiations. "This will all be yours one day." My mother was equally pleased, gifting me elegant business suits for my birthdays, while Mason received inexpensive history books. The decisive moment came when Mason declared his intention to pursue archaeology in college. We were seated in our opulent dining room, under a chandelier that cost more than a luxury car, when he broke the news. "You're what?" My father exploded, disbelief and disapproval crashing down like his fork against the fine china. "No son of mine will waste his life digging in the dirt." "William, please," my mother intervened, though her expression revealed her silent agreement. "It's what I love, Dad," Mason responded, calm yet resolute. "I've been accepted to the program, and Grayson believes I have real potential." "Potential to be poor," my father retorted, emphasizing our identity as business people, not dirt scholars. Mason's resolve hardened, his determination clear. "Then I guess I'm not a business person," he declared, rising from his seat. That night, the family dynamics shifted irrevocably. I was no longer simply an alternative. I became the focal point of my father's aspirations, the sole heir apparent to Ellie Pharmaceuticals. The expectations placed on me were enormous, transforming my role within the family and shaping my future in ways I never anticipated. I truly believed I loved it, that I was destined to be there. Medical college was my dream come true, renowned for its elite status, fiercely competitive nature, and, unsurprisingly, its wealthy student body. There, amidst the opulence of designer fashion and limitless spending, I found my niche. It was in the campus library, of all places, where I met Joseph. I was wrestling with a coding assignment, muttering frustrations at my laptop, when he appeared beside me. "Need some help?" he offered, settling into the adjacent chair. His warm, brown eyes and soft accent, the origins of which I couldn't pinpoint, intrigued me from the start. Joseph was a prodigy in computer science, having earned a full scholarship. His academic brilliance was acknowledged campus-wide. Grayson showcased his work as exemplary, and peers vied for his presence in group projects. Despite his acclaim, he carried himself with unassuming grace. After several study sessions over coffee, I finally asked about his past. He shared, with straightforward ease, that his parents had emigrated from Syria during his early childhood. His father worked as a security officer and his mother as a she-cooks in a restaurant. Joseph had been programming since age 10, learning on a used laptop, even taking web developer jobs to support family expenses. Unlike him, I had never known the weight of financial responsibility. His resilience, devoid of any self-pity, only deepened my respect and admiration. A month into our acquaintance, we started dating. Joseph was different from the affluent circles I had always known. He exhibited genuine courtesy, a stark contrast to the rehearsed politeness I was accustomed to. Our dates were at quaint, family-run eateries where the food was delightful and the proprietors greeted him by name. 3 months into our relationship, he proposed during a sunset stroll on campus, not with a lavish diamond, but with a simple silver band he had saved for. It was understated, sincere, perfect. My father, initially overjoyed about my engagement, hastily arranged a grand dinner to introduce Joseph to the extended family, likely imagining him as an heir to some corporate empire. However, the moment we entered the dining room, I sensed a shift. The initial smiles from my relatives soon morphed into thinly veiled disdain. My aunt audibly gasped, clutching her pearls, while my mother's glass of champagne halted midair. The room fell silent until my father's voice broke the stillness, his tone patronizing as he addressed Joseph, asking him to elaborate on his background. Joseph, maintaining his composure amidst the palpable hostility, answered with dignity. I admired his poise as he navigated the uncomfortable scrutiny, his hand gripping mine under the table. In that moment, the contrast between my world and his couldn't have been starker, yet my decision to stand by him felt more certain than ever. In a calm and steady voice, Zay addressed the room, "Sir, my family moved here from Syria when I was only 8 years old. We've made this our home ever since." He spoke with a quiet respect, while the ornate chandelier overhead cast sharp shadows across his father's features, giving him a somewhat daunting appearance. My father works as a security officer at Atlantic Corp, and my mother is a she cooks in a restaurant, he continued, his pride intact despite the simplicity of their jobs. I started working part-time as soon as I was old enough to contribute to our family's income. Fortunately, I was able to secure a full scholarship to Preston. The revelation made my mother nearly choke on her wine in surprise, prompting her to gulp down water as her pearls quivered with each swallow. Around the table, Aunt Avery and Uncle shared knowing glances, and Cousin Elena couldn't hide a smirk behind her perfectly poised hand. My father's face turned a deeper shade of red, a prominent vein throbbing on his forehead, a telltale sign of his rising anger. As he pushed his dinner plate away forcefully, causing the fine china to clink loudly, he challenged Zay. "My daughter Ellie has always lived a certain way, never lacking anything. How do you plan to provide for her?" Before I could intervene, Zay replied with a calm that contrasted sharply with my father's temper. "I've been successfully trading in the investing content editor market, Mr. Ellie, and I'm also laying the groundwork for my own tech startup." "Digital asset trader," my father scoffed, his laugh bouncing off the rich mahogany paneling, reminiscent of a painful memory of a family member duped by a scam. "You mean like the scheme that swindled Aunt Martha out of her savings?" "Dad, it's not the same," I protested, my pulse racing, but Zay, well-versed in blockchain technology and recognized as a speaker at tech conferences, tried to reassure him. "Enough." My father's voice boomed as he slammed his hand on the table, causing the crystal to rattle and the silverware to jump. The room flinched, but Zay remained composed. "I know a con when I see one. Your Aunt Martha thought she knew better, too," my father growled, not hiding his disdain. "Dad, please," I pleaded as he stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the hardwood, towering over us with a fury that chilled me. "You don't understand our values, our way of life. You're not one of us," he declared, his words cutting through the tense air. I watched, heartbroken, as my father, a man who taught me the importance of ethics and integrity, revealed a side of himself driven by prejudice and rage. The rest of the family seemed to silently agree with him, nodding as though his words were merely stating the obvious. His finger pointed accusingly at Zay, his face twisted in anger. "I see right through you." Zay maintained his composure, trying to address my father's concerns, yet the divide had already been drawn, marking a moment that would redefine how I saw my family and their supposed values. At the family dinner, tensions were high as accusations flew toward Joseph. labeled a gold digger by William, who believed Joseph was only after my daughter's inheritance, the conversation took an unpleasant turn. My mother intervened, not in Joseph's defense, but to remind me of my youth and the family's expectations that I should focus on my education and career first, suggesting marriage could wait until I found a more suitable partner. Uncle chimed in, suspecting Joseph's interest in our family's pharmacy chain, drawing parallels to a past suitor who had ulterior motives. Patricia, joining the fray, dismissed Joseph's intentions as manipulative. Throughout this, Joseph remained composed, yet I noticed the slight tension in his expression and the firm grip on his glass that betrayed his calm exterior. My father scornfully questioned the future Joseph could offer, mocking his aspirations and our possible life together. Overwhelmed by the unjust and prejudiced barrage, I stood up abruptly, my chair crashing down, and demanded they stop. I declared my disappointment in their narrow-mindedness and snobbery. Grabbing Joseph's hand, I announced our departure. As we walked out, my father's threatening words echoed in the foyer, warning of regret and reminding me of my so-called obligations due to their investments in my education. I turned back one last time, asserting that the only thing I owed was to exit respectfully rather than expressing my true feelings. Ignoring further shouts about debts and obligations, Joseph and I left. A year later, we both graduated college. He topped his class in computer science, and I earned my business degree. We moved into a simple apartment, and contrary to my family's grim predictions, we found happiness. When Joseph proposed that summer, I eagerly agreed. I crafted a beautiful wedding announcement on social media, sharing our engagement photo and a message about love overcoming boundaries. The backlash was immediate, with family members voicing their disapproval and refusal to attend what they called a disgrace. Despite the hurtful comments, I focused on the support and love that surrounded us, realizing some relationships, like debts, aren't worth maintaining when they cost too much to bear. After enduring years of waiting for my family's acceptance, I reached my breaking point during an intense phone call with my mother. Her harsh words, declaring I was making the biggest mistake of my life, echoed in my mind as she adamantly stated her refusal to attend my wedding. That night, tears blurred my vision while Zay comforted me, suggesting we could delay our plans to give my family more time. But I was tired of waiting. I resolved that we would proceed with or without their blessing. Unexpectedly, 5 days before our ceremony, my brother Mason arrived from an archaeological excavation in Egypt, where he had been uncovering a new tomb. Despite the layers of desert dust coating him, his presence was a joyful surprise. His warm embrace reassured me, and his promise to walk me down the aisle lifted my spirits. Our wedding was a quaint affair set in a lush garden adorned with twinkling fairy lights. Zay's relatives filled one side of the aisle, their faces beaming with genuine affection, having welcomed me into their family from the start. My side, however, was noticeably sparse. Only Mason and a few brave cousins attended, defying the family's boycott. As time passed, Zay's career in technology flourished, and I launched a successful clothing store. Together, we were building a new life, independent of my family's wealth. Then, an unexpected invitation arrived, a request for a presence at my father William Ellie's 65th birthday. Holding the card, a mix of hope and anxiety stirred within me. Zay, sensing my turmoil, reassured me that he would support whatever decision I made. On the night of the party, we dressed meticulously. I chose a rare first edition of my father's favorite business book as a gift, hoping it would bridge the gap between us. As we entered the room, a hush fell over the crowd, the tension palpable. Despite the chilly reception, I walked forward and presented the gift to my father, who dismissively tossed it aside, undermining the sentiment behind it. The dinner unfolded like a theatrical display of malice. Relatives took turns belittling Zay with snide remarks about his job, his attire, and his unfamiliarity with the nuances of high society. Aunt Avery mockingly questioned his knowledge of dinner etiquette, and my mother slyly commented on his simple suit. Through it all, Zay remained dignified, his composure unshaken despite their attempts to diminish him. Throughout the evening, The stark contrast between the warmth of Zay's family and the cold disdain of my own became ever clearer. It reinforced my conviction that building our life together, on our terms, was the right choice. Even in the face of such adversity, we knew we would face it united, reinforcing the strength of our bond against any challenge. He achieved great success in life, coming from humble beginnings to earn every ounce of respect in the technology industry. Despite his achievements, he often faced those who underestimated him simply because his success was self-made, not inherited. This came to a head during a particularly tense family gathering. My father, with a grand gesture, raised his glass and announced loudly to everyone at the table, effectively silencing them. He mused about what would become of his daughter marrying beneath her station. He asked me directly, with a tone dripping with disdain, if I missed the extravagant life of credit cards and shopping sprees, or if my husband had managed to sustain our lifestyle with the modest earnings from his little computer games. At that moment, something inside me broke. I stood up so abruptly that my chair clattered to the floor. Trembling with anger, I confronted them. "How dare you?" I challenged, staring down at the array of expensive clothes and opulent surroundings. I accused them of being petty and cruel, people who had never truly earned anything on their own. The room fell into an intense silence. I pointed out their obsession with wealth and their neglect of basic humanity. My father's face turned a deep shade of purple as he stood to face me, enraged by my words. He declared his disappointment in my choices and my defense of my husband, whom he dismissed as a fortune hunter. His voice rose even higher as he disinherited me on the spot, announcing to the family that I was no longer his daughter. With a dramatic wave, he introduced my cousin Andrew as his new heir, someone he claimed understood the value of family traditions and maintaining standards. The room burst into applause as Andrew accepted the mantle, thanking our uncle. I looked around at the faces of those I had once considered family, my mother clapping, my cousin smirking, and my aunts and uncles nodding at what they saw as my just desserts. I knew then what I had to do. Taking my husband Joseph's hand, I declared that we were done with this charade, for good. In the years that followed, Joseph's investments in digital asset trader and his launch of a tech company specializing in innovative AI solutions proved wildly successful. Within 1 year, his company, Tech Vision Enterprises, was valued at over $710 million. The same internet money my father had mocked now formed the backbone of a thriving empire. As my husband's name began to appear in business magazines and tech journals, earning titles like 47 Under 47 Most Innovative CEO and Tech Visionary of the Year, my pride in him only grew. Despite his success, he remained the humble man I loved, always remembering his employees' names, opening doors for others, and choosing simplicity over extravagance. This journey reinforced a powerful lesson. True worth comes not from wealth, but from how one chooses to live and treat others. After making their fortune, they now enjoyed a life of tasteful luxury instead of struggling with financial hardships. Eager to prove his father wrong about his life choices, he longed to share his successes with him, despite their strained relationship that had remained tense since a failed birthday dinner. The silence between them had become a peaceful norm. Then, an invitation arrived that shook things up. It was to Elena Ellie's wedding, the cousin who had once ridiculed his partner Joseph's manners and fashion sense. He showed the elegant, cream-colored invitation to Joseph that evening, whose compassionate response reflected his deep-seated belief in the importance of family, despite past grievances. They decided to attend the wedding, held in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. Upon their arrival, the atmosphere transformed. Zahn Hassan, now a celebrated CEO and recent interviewee in Tech Weekly, was recognized instantly. His recent business achievements, including a lucrative deal with Microsoft, turned former critics into fawning admirers. Those same relatives who had dismissed him were now eager to engage, thrusting business cards at him and soliciting investment tips. Joseph handled the sudden attention with grace and kindness, treating everyone with respect, even those who had not extended the same courtesy in the past. Aunt Avery, once a critic of his manners, now praised his brilliance, marveling at his feature in Forbes. Watching this, he couldn't help but reflect on the ironic twists of fate. The once denigrated fortune hunter had built a substantial legacy, dwarfing the Ellie's own wealth, yet he remained humble and gracious. The surprise didn't end there. His parents, now overtly friendly and flattering, approached with a facade of affection, congratulating him on his publicized successes. Their demeanor hinted at ulterior motives, confirmed during the wedding banquet. The true cause of their newfound warmth came to light. Andrew, the chosen successor, had jeopardized Stewart Pharmaceuticals with his reckless decisions, leaving the family desperate for Joseph's goodwill and potential rescue. This revelation painted a clear picture of their priorities, showcasing how quickly fortunes and opinions could change in the face of success and adversity. Their family was now entangled in several lawsuits due to selling counterfeit drugs, and they were under scrutiny by the FDA. My father confided in a hushed tone that banks were avoiding them like the plague and admitted, "We're in deep trouble, sweetheart." The legal expenses were astronomical. My mother, visibly distressed, dabbed at her tears with a napkin. They had mortgaged everything they owned. My father, seeking solidarity, extended his hand across the dinner table to Zay, my husband. Despite our rocky start, he pleaded for financial help, hoping for a few million to manage their crisis, insisting that family helps family. Zay, always empathetic, was nearly ready to write a check, but I held his hand to stop him. Echoing the sentiment, I said coldly, "Family helps family, right?" I reminded them of the time they had disowned me, not once, but twice. My father tried to intimidate me with his stern tone, reminiscent of my childhood. But I was resolute, highlighting the lessons he taught about not handing money to strangers. Ironically, he had become one. As he grew furious, I continued to hold my ground, especially as we celebrated another couple at a wedding reception. I declared that I couldn't associate with those who exploited the sick for profit. My father, outraged and in disbelief at my audacity, accused me of ingratitude. Calmly, I stood and suggested he could disown me a third time if he wished, but it would not change my stance. Hand in hand with Zay, we left the venue, my father's angry words trailing us, yet this time, I walked away smiling. That was 1 year ago. Mason, a family friend, occasionally updates me on their status. The once mighty Stewart Pharmaceuticals had collapsed. The home I grew up in was auctioned off. My parents now lived in a modest condo, having sold their extravagant cars and my mother's cherished jewelry to cover their debts. Reflecting on the past, I realized life's strange way of revealing true character. My humble husband, an immigrant, had built a successful empire through sheer diligence and integrity, while my respectable family had lost everything due to their greed and shortcuts. This experience taught me that true wealth isn't measured by money. It's about having people who support and elevate you, who stand by you through thick and thin. By that measure, I consider myself the wealthiest woman alive.